Guys, it's Allie, and today we're doing something a little different. I just delivered a persuasive speech to my speech coach, Shaheen Davari, and yes, that is the Shaheen Davari from season 48 of Survivor. I've been working with him for 2 months, and I was trying to get him to join my team for the Hydrocephalus walk, and he said, Allie, this has to go on your YouTube channel. It's too good to just do it for me. So I hope you enjoy it, and thanks for listening. So hydrocephalus is a load of BS, or brain surgery, that is. Now, I don't believe that 12 should be a small number when you're considering the number of surgeries that you've had. I had my first surgery the day after my first birthday, and my last surgery the day after my last birthday. Now, between those two surgeries, I had 11 additional surgeries, and all of them were hydrocephalus related. And you know what the crazy thing is? I am lucky. I am lucky because I have only had 12 hydrocephalus related surgeries, with the last one being on September 23rd of 2020, which some of you may remember if you've been around here that long.
There I am in the hospital in 2020, the day or two after my last hydrocephalus-related surgery.
Many hydro warriors, which is what they call us, have had dozens of surgeries or even over 100 surgeries. That's why I do the hydrocephalus walk. And I would love for you to join my team to walk and raise awareness about hydrocephalus. You can join virtually or in person if you're going to be in the area.
If I already have you convinced, you can join or donate by clicking the link below.
Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my history with hydrocephalus and the Hydrocephalus Association, and then I want to tell you about Britney, a hydro warrior who changed my life, and how I look at my own history with hydrocephalus. And then finally, I want to tell you why you should join my team to raise money and awareness about hydrocephalus, and why you should join me for the walk on September 20th. Now, I was born with hydrocephalus, which is the leading cause of brain surgery in kids. Surgery is the only known treatment for hydrocephalus, and the most common treatment is placing a shunt in the ventricle of the brain. And a shunt is a mechanical device that is used to drain fluid out of the brain. I have had 12 hydrocephalus related surgeries. Most of them were due to shunt malfunctions. And now the Hydrocephalus Association says that 1 in 700 babies are born with hydrocephalus. As according to Johns Hopkins, and 1 to 2 out of every 1,000 babies are born with hydrocephalus. But you can also get hydrocephalus from brain tumors, or has had trauma, cysts on their brain, or meningitis. Now, in comparison, 1 in 775 babies are born with Down syndrome. Now, the Hydrocephalus Association also talks about normal pressure hydrocephalus, which can develop later in life and can be misdiagnosed as Parkinson's disease or dementia. So for the sake of this argument, I'll be focusing on people who are born with hydrocephalus because that's what I am most knowledgeable and familiar about. But I did want you to know that it is possible for anyone to develop hydrocephalus, because research on hydrocephalus can improve the prognosis for people who develop it later in life. Now, the Hydrocephalus Association is devoted to education, research, advocacy, and support for people with hydrocephalus and their families. My earliest experiences with Hydrocephalus Association were in college. My mom found out that the Illinois chapter of the Hydrocephalus Association had a support group and that would be meeting, and she and I went there to share our experiences and hear stories from other hydro warriors and their parents. And there was a woman there named Desiree who told us about her daughter, Britney. Britney was fine after her first shunt placement, and she didn't have any problems until she was 13. Desiree told us that Britney had started having complications when she was 13, and that she had just had her 70th surgery in under 3 months, or under 3 years, excuse me. That means 20% of her days were spent in the hospital. She was in pain all the time and had trouble seeing, but she still wanted to go to school, which I understood because I was adamant that I was going to graduate college or die trying. And at that point, I'd had at least 4 surgeries since starting college. Now, I got to meet Britney at the next Hydrocephalus walk. Her pain was 15 out of 10, according to, as her mother said, but she still wanted to be there to walk, and which I found inspirational. The next Hydrocephalus walk I went to was about a year later, and there was an announcement at the beginning of the walk that Britney couldn't make it because cerebral spinal fluid had started leaking out of her incision from a surgery 2 weeks prior, and she was going to be rushed into her 81st surgery. That year, I walked not just for me, but also for Britney. Something in me changed after hearing Britney's story. I decided to start sharing my story and becoming more of an advocate for people with hydrocephalus. I decided that as someone with mild hydrocephalus, it was my responsibility to talk about it, because people like Britney couldn't go out in the world and talk about it because they were spending so much time in the hospital just trying to survive surgeries and get back to normal life. So I'm not the biggest fan of social media, but one of the benefits of it is that there are a lot of support groups on Facebook where parents and hydro warriors can go and ask their questions. The most common questions that show up in those groups are from frantic parents who have just gone in for a 20 to 24 week ultrasound, and either a doctor or an ultrasound tech has recommended termination of the pregnancy, and they're wondering what their baby's quality of life is going to be like. And they are always surrounded by love and support from the parents of hydro warriors, and they also get a bit ambushed by myself and other hydro warriors telling them what our life has been like, and that they shouldn't terminate the pregnancy because as we can't tell, we don't know what the life is going to be like just from the 20 or 24 week scan. And now Britney is the exception, not the norm, as far as I've been able to gather. I personally tell all parents what I've personally accomplished in life. I've going to college, getting married, own a home, gone to grad school, etc. And I'll also tell them about the challenges I've had and the treatments that have helped. Now, the hydrocephalus walk taught me that I wasn't alone in having hydrocephalus. The support groups taught me that there were many more Britneys out there who had dozens of surgeries and were just struggling to stay alive. And I was lucky to only have had 12 surgeries. As I said, I don't believe that 12 should be a small number when you're considering how many surgeries you've had a person should have. And I'd love to see the day when only the worst case end up having 12 surgeries, but we're far from there. There are lots of things that can go wrong with these shunts. Out of the 8 times my shunts have malfunctioned, each time was a different way of malfunctioning. Twice the tubing broke. Once a valve got holes in it and was draining fluid when I was upright. Once the catheter in my brain got clogged. Once a piece of tissue got stuck in the valve, which caused the shunt to get stuck on the wrong setting, and that one was really weird. And anytime you have surgery, there's always the risk of infection. If an infection gets in the tubing, the whole shunt system needs to be removed and replaced. And I've been very fortunate that I've never had to deal with an infected shunt. And it's important to note that complications from hydrocephalus can be fatal. It always breaks my heart when I read about hydro warriors losing their battle with hydrocephalus, because it's so easy to feel connected to them. Now, by now, hopefully I've convinced you that hydrocephalus should be researched, not just for those of us who are born with it and currently have them, but also to improve the prognosis for people who develop it. Now, I may have even convinced you that you should do a walk somewhere. But why should you do it in Iowa? And what can you learn from the Hydrocephalus walk that you can take back to your communities? Let's start with the most important one. What can you take back to your communities? Given that Hydrocephalus walk is about as common as Down syndrome, there is a chance that you've encountered more than one person in your life that's either been born with hydrocephalus or will develop hydrocephalus in your lifetime. You can meet hydro warriors like me, learn about our lives, and pass that understanding on to the next person. One thing that differentiates hydrocephalus from Down syndrome is that you can't see it. You can't tell someone has hydrocephalus unless their head is shaved and you can see the shunt and the scarring. Here's some pictures from my 2020 surgery. I was really nervous about showing my face and hair on camera, so I wanted to do selfies every day to get used to seeing myself without hair. And you don't know that someone has a headache and complications unless they tell you and you trust them. Something that can be very scary for hydro warriors and their families because it's common to not be believed. And that can get really dangerous for us. So I hope you will consider joining me as a virtual or in-person walker to walk for all the Britneys out there and to raise money for the Hydrocephalus Association. As I said, Hydrocephalus Association is dedicated to supporting hydro warriors and their families, researching hydrocephalus to find better treatments, and educating the general public about hydrocephalus. And don't forget, hydrocephalus is a load of BS. And one thing I forgot to mention is that if you want to join us for a virtual or in-person walk, you can click the link below. Thank you very much for listening and have a great rest of your day.